James, how would you describe the difference between this year's Bengals? And obviously, we've got Joe Burrow coming in, tremendous amount of excitement with that draft pick. But I'm more interested in the Zach Taylor locker room. How would you compare your sense of the Zach Taylor locker room and the spirit, the optimism? I assume, or maybe not, but how would you compare the morale of the Zach Taylor Bengals to what we saw towards the tail end of Marvin Lewis's tenure in Cincinnati?
Well, there's hope. And I know hope will be used, and I've used it to describe the fan base, but that hope that Burrow brings and that 8 free agents and committed nearly $150 million in free agency, that brings hope to the locker room. Players realize that. I know multiple players have texted each other this offseason when it was happening. Oh, man, did you see we got DJ Reader? Or did you see we got Trey Waynes? And, yeah, you know, you could debate whether or not Waynes is worth the money and things like that. But overall, I think the key is hope and culture. They went out and got a bunch of guys that are coming from playoff teams that are entering their prime. It's their second contract, not their third or fourth contract. They did it early in the free agency process. So now Joe Burrow, after hours of meeting with these coaches and stuff before the draft, virtually like we are, right? He's like, man, they want to win. They're asking me what plays I like, and they're doing things like that. So now he's bought it. So all these veterans are buying in because they're spending money to help win and improve the roster in places and weak spots that they needed. So, yeah, I think that's the key. I think it's a collaborative effort. One, Zach Taylor and Duke Tobin being willing to say, hey, Mike Brown, we have to get better and we have to improve and we have to make up for our lack of successful drafts, because that's what got them into this spot. And so they had to spend their way out of it to a degree. And I think they started to do that this year. They're going to have to continue to be aggressive next offseason to kind of complete the process. But I think that's the key is hope and building a winning culture. And it takes time. But I think they're bringing in the right guys. They had 7 draft picks. 6 of them were captains. That might be overrated. But at the same time, that's great. That's much better than bringing in an undrafted free agent that, you know, struggles, to make weight at the combine or struggled with, and I'm referring to Vontaze Perfect, struggled during the pre-draft process and then becomes an issue and then gets the captain on his chest. So I think that they want to build a winning culture, and the players in the roster, they have hope now. And that isn't just from Joe Burrow. That isn't just from Zach Taylor. That's from all of the moves they've made over the past 17 months or so.
And James, I tell you, you're getting me fired up, and I'm a Colts fan. And Frogs talked about this actually in reference to the Colts and Chris Ballard building that kind of culture as well. And we see it from our side of things. You mentioned Joe Burrow. So much in the way of expectations and pressure comes with being the top overall draft pick, even more so when you're a quarterback, and even more so when you are the most accomplished quarterback in a single season in the history of college football. Is there any way, shape, or form that he can live up to the expectations we have for him?
There is. Absolutely, 100% there is. And the expectations are sky high. I'm working on a piece for next week, and it literally came from 2 poll results on Twitter that I put out there before the draft that everyone's already forgot about. And it just shows the pressure and the expectations that are on Joe Burrow. But I think he's a guy that embraces that. He doesn't – I'll use a basketball analogy. When he goes to the free throw line, he isn't worried about the stands or what people are thinking or anything like that. And a free throw is very mental, right? He's thinking about making that free throw. And I think he's built the same way the Kobe Bryants of the world are, the Tom Brady's of the world are, the Russell Wilsons. That doesn't mean he is them. And he drew a lot of comparisons to those guys in the pre-draft process. But I do think the one thing he has is he wants to win. He has that leadership in the intangibles and the leadership that it takes for that. So he's going to get all of these guys. I think this is going to happen in training camp, and maybe even before that in virtual meetings. This locker room is going to buy into Joe Burrow. Again, that doesn't mean they're going to win 8, 9, 10 games, but they're going to buy into him because I spent 30 minutes on a Zoom call with him the night he got drafted, and I was like, man, this dude, he's just different, and you can feel it and you can sense it. And if I can sense it, other reporters can sense it. I'm damn sure the team is going to as well. So I think he can live up to it. That doesn't mean he needs to be, again, Tom Brady. If he's Tony Romo and the Bengals do what they need to do, if he's the next Tony Romo, and the Bengals do what they need to do, they will be more than satisfied. They'll make multiple deep playoff runs. We'll be talking about them in AFC title games and maybe Super Bowls, because Tony Romo was extremely good and the Cowboys failed him. It wasn't the other way. They gave him a good roster at the end of his career, and then he got injured. So I think if the Bengals do right by Burrow, they're going to be quite satisfied with what he brings to the team.
I got to share, James, I'm excited for you to be covering the Bengals because, like, you're a professional, but at the same time, like, it's so awesome that you're covering a team that you've always had an affinity for, and it looks like things are trending up, especially for someone that you can feel a belief in, and that means so much. Now, here's the question. What's your favorite Cincinnati sports memory, and then also what's your most heartbreaking Cincinnati sports memory?
Oh, man. The heartbreaking one, I guess it's not easy because there's a lot of them. The favorite's tough because I've grown up in the dark ages of Cincinnati sports. I was born, so the Bengals' last playoff win was January 6th, 91. I was born August 5th, 91. So I haven't seen a playoff win. I haven't sniffed a playoff win. The Reds have only won, outside of 95, haven't won a playoff series in my lifetime. So there's a lot there. I don't remember the Bob Huggins Final Four run.
Yeah,
that's heartbreak.
Maybe.
Yeah, well, that's the heartbreak. They could have won the national title, but his injury. So I'll start with the heartbreak. To me, it's tough. I would go with 05 just because I think that was the year I really bought in to the Bengals. And not that I thought that they were going to win the Super Bowl that year, but I thought they got one. They got an elite quarterback. He was being mentioned, Carson was, with Tom Brady and Peyton Manning. And when he went down with the knee, while he was right after that, I believe in 06, the team never got right and it never worked. And so that kind of derailed things. So I would say from a heartbreaking standpoint, probably that 05 team. As far as the best memory, I'll give you two. The first one, Jay Bruce, the clinch miss, when I got to see that back in 2010. So I'm in college. I walk into the kitchen. I was living in Deer Park. I walk to the kitchen, and my roommate is watching. He hits the home run while I'm in the kitchen, and I miss it. But we still celebrated like crazy. So that's one. The other one, it's tough. I think about the All-Star game was really good. I wasn't there. I was there for a lot of the festivities, but I wasn't there for Todd Frazier. But that was a big one too. I almost forgot about that. That was a really good one, and Todd's a good guy. We'll go with that one. That's fine. We can go with that one. Not many. You see that? You see the theme here? If I mention the 99 Bearcat, the 2000 Bearcats, it's Kenyon Martin. If I mention, the 2002, it's Steve Logan and those guys losing to UCLA. There's not many amazing ones, but James, I would go with those.
Yeah, I have to agree. I think that the other two, not being a Cincinnati fan, I don't know if you can appreciate the significance of what James was just talking about, but it seems like recently, I'm a little older than you. I'm 40 years old, so I can recall the 1990 World Series and sweeping Oakland, and I can recall the Super Bowl in '89, even though we lost. But you're right, man. For the past 30 years, it's been near misses with our best team, right? Carson with his knee getting blown out. The Reds, the year that San Francisco came back and beat the Reds in the Major League Baseball playoffs when we were up, was it 2-0 in a best-of-5 or
2-0?
Yeah, exactly. They came back and beat one of the best Reds teams we've seen in so long. We have, the 2015 playoff Bengals game with Jeremy Hill's infamous fumble. Unfortunately, I think Cincinnati sports fans have been absolutely agonized. We had a podcast a few days ago when predictably, Frog and everybody else was talking about how Cleveland, everyone's hearts breaks for Cleveland, and man, have they had a tough run of sports history and things along those lines. But I think as you're articulating, Cincinnati sports fan, they don't necessarily ask for the pity or the attention. Cleveland sports fan is basically the guy you're playing pickup basketball with that turns his ankle, right? And he plays the rest of the game, but no matter what play he makes, he's got to grimace in pain and scream and make everybody think that, whoa, that's amazing. This guy is so injured and he just hit a putback layup? Or how did he get that loose ball when he's clearly in so much pain? Cincinnati fans just don't talk about it as much. But you're highlighting the misery that we have had to fight through. I like to think that your comments about Joe Burrow are a sign that we're about to get to the other side of that, though. To hear that you spent 30 minutes on a Zoom call with him, and that you were absolutely blown away. We haven't had a quarterback like that here for a long time. Andy was a great guy. He didn't necessarily have that same fire, right? Carson, talented quarterback, not the kind of guy you heard people raving about with his leadership and wanted to follow him into hell. So I'm really encouraged to hear you say that about Joe Burrow, because it makes me think we do have our piece of the pie coming soon.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's when it wasn't just me. It was me and 40 reporters that on the night of the draft. And he was fielding all different types of questions about Andy Dalton and his future and different things like that. And I think he's ready for it. Right. And we all get told no at some point. And I know people knock Burrow because he didn't beat out Dwayne Haskins and he was coming off of injuries, and there's reasons behind that and all that, but it led him to LSU, and he had the best season in college football history. And he does have that leadership ability. And you're right. Carson didn't have that. Carson couldn't reel in Chad. I don't think Joe would have I think Joe could reel in Chad today. Chad Johnson's 40-something years old, and I think he could do it, right? So I think that that's part of what Burrow brings. He might not have the strongest arm in the world, might not be the fastest guy, but he's good enough at those things, and he's also extremely intelligent and a great leader.
You know what I'm struck by is as I watched The Last Dance, every one of their stars had a setback. You know, Jordan didn't make the varsity as a sophomore, and Pippen didn't make his college team. He's an equipment manager. And Rodman, you know, they all went through what Joe Burrow went through at Ohio State, and they got better because of it. I'm going to ask you, is Joe Burrow going to be the greatest Cincinnati Bengal of all time? You can go on record right now. And
I see, you talk about pressure. I think in a perfect world, yeah, right, he would do that. I think that's an extremely high bar. But at the same time, whoever's the quarterback of the team that brings a Super Bowl to Cincinnati probably takes that title. That's just the reality of it. That probably happens.
So guys, James is saying right now, Joe Burrow will bring a Super Bowl to Cincinnati. Let me ask you.
You can twist that if you want. That's fine.
Let me ask you this. The team recently decided not to pick up the 5th-year option on John Ross. What's your take on that?
I think it makes sense. Look, I'm as big of a believer in John as anyone. I've made that clear. And I think he still can be a really, really good, dynamic NFL player. But they have a lot of guys they have to figure out. And Carl Lawson, for example, if you had a 5th-year option on Carl Lawson, would you exercise it? Not at that money, because he's been injured in each of the past 2 years. So Ross flashed last year. I think this year in Zach Taylor's system, with a guy like Joe Burrow, who's going to get Ross right. They've already thrown together. I knew before the draft they both worked out in California together before COVID. What was such a thing that shut everything down. So, yeah, I think he's going to have a big year, and I think everything around him complements him well. I think Burrow's accuracy, I think that aspect of it is going to change, because instead of having to dive or jump out of bounds or different things like that, he was just always seemed out of sync with Andy Dalton. I don't think that'll be the case with Joe Burrow and John Ross. So I get it. People are down on him in Cincinnati, but the people I trust believe in him still. And I remember not many people watched Washington. He was dominant at Washington, and he gave us a taste of it last year at the start of the season. So I think John's going to have a big year, and Joe Burrow is going to be a big reason why.
Great. James, listen, we so appreciate you joining us. We're going to link to your Twitter down below. Once again, James Rapien, the beat writer for Sports Illustrated for the Cincinnati Bengals. Thank you so much for taking time to join us. You've definitely got me hyped up about Joe Burrow, and I know Steve needs no more hype for it. And maybe Frog could swing down and become a Bengals fan.
No Bengals fan, but I'm rooting for nothing but good things. Just like Cincinnati embraced LeBron, I will be happy to embrace Joe Burrow, Ohio's own, if he does well.
Yeah, guys, thanks for having me. This was a lot of fun. And I think it might take a year or two to get the Bengals on the winning trajectory, but Joe Burrow drafting him and doing what they did this offseason certainly is pointing them in the right direction.
That's awesome, James. We'll see you at the Super Bowl Media Day when the Bengals are down there in a few years.
I hope so. I would love it.
Awesome, man. Thank you.